AI is just the tool, right? It's just a tool that's going to help you, another tool in your toolbox to help you solve that problem. And then bring in the experts that know, kind of the engineers that can say, oh, or your kind of your vendor partners, right, in your ecosystem that can say, oh, you know what, like this is how we could solve that for you. This is how we could remove that friction using AI. Because it does, it's a new tool in your toolbox. It's very powerful, but it's still, like you said, same old story, right? You just have to really know the problem you're trying to solve before jumping out and starting to kind of put it in place. You're going to freak people out. Some people are
Yeah.
getting freaked out. Some people are already freaked out. I think that's critical and maintaining that, the trust in the organization as well.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper. I'm the CEO and managing partner at Sapient Insights Group, and I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about what you might do about them. So joining me today is Sofia Whelan. She is the co-founder of HorizonHuman and a leader in HR digital transformation with over 15 years of experience helping organizations build operating models, skill strategies, use AI, and all coming from sort of a strategy and a real world know-how perspective. Welcome, Sofia. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Sofia is coming to us from Sweden, so it's getting dark there as we're getting up here on the East Coast. So we will keep this light, but we chatted recently about addressing the gap in conversation about AI implementation and really how it's impacting HR in particular. I recently led a panel at HR Tech on some similar themes, and I thought this would be a really good conversation to kind of follow up on that topic and broaden the perspective a bit. And so I'd love to get into what you're seeing and what you're experiencing in your transformation work and just share another perspective about HR and what I'm calling the future of work, right? Does that sound like a good plan to you?
Sounds great. I love talking about this stuff.
Let's get into the huddle. So maybe before we jump in, talk a little bit about your background and experience because it's pretty diverse, and I know people want to hear about what you're up to.
Yeah, great. Of course. So I am kind of a HR transformation junkie. I've worked both as a consultant and as a practitioner, and now running my own consulting firm, but all focused on continuing to build and increase the impact that HR can have on a business. So I started my career with Deloitte in London, then New York, and where I got the opportunity to really sort of see the trends firsthand and translate those into sort of implementations for our clients. And it started really as early as even pre, SaaS, and then of course came SaaS, and then a big focus on digital transformation, big focus on how do we shift operating model to keep up with that, and then big focus, of course, on the employee experience. So I've sort of seen the journey. I don't know if everybody's experienced it that way, but that's kind of how I've experienced the journey. And then I got the opportunity to go in-house and lead a bunch of work at JP Morgan Chase as a practitioner, again around digital transformation, around what we called the product operating model. Other people may know it as kind of an agile HR model. Again, just kind of focusing on how HR needs to shift the work that they do and the skills they have, and kind of how we work as an HR function differently with the kind of introduction of more and more technology. And then ultimately started my own company to continue to kind of share that impact and that knowledge and that passion that I have with more companies. And I think this is extremely well timed. This is just the topic that everybody's talking about more than ever. And I see so many opportunities for HR to have that impact that, I think I'm very passionate about helping helping HR have on business.
Yeah, I want to apologize to my audience because I feel like all I ever talk about these days is AI. But the reality is there's so many pieces and parts. It affects us in so many different ways. And there's still a whole lot of anxiety out there about it. Like people don't know exactly how it's going to affect us. And they're talking about different ways and different things they could do, but a lot of people are just focused on the tech. Like, hey, we've got the tech, it's doing our
Hmm.
recruiting, it's helping us build content for learning, whatever the case might be. But it's bigger than that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I always like we could replace AI with any other word for any tool. It's just a tool. Really, what matters is what problems do we solve with it and how does it impact our workforce? So I look at it in two ways. Like the way I like to think about it is, because in terms of the role HR has at this, advent of AI, yes, everybody's nervous. Okay, so HR plays a big role in any organization of culture carrier, kind of making sure the workforce feels good, driving engagement, kind of really nurturing that workforce, right? HR plays a big role in that. And I think at this moment in time where people are really worried, and I was, I can talk more about this as well. I was at Unleash in Paris last week, and I do think that the research I saw, and, I think that there's a different feeling in Europe versus the United States around kind of the impact of AI and what's going to happen. Because in generally, of course, in Europe, people have kind of stronger labor laws, right? So it's a little bit different. But back to the point, I think here and there, people are worried about the impact that HR is going to have on their job, on their lives. And HR, like I said, has a really important role to play in sort of nurturing and making sure that the workforce feels, uh, engaged and I guess frankly less worried about kind of losing their jobs. So this is my first point around kind of the impact of AI and HR is that HR really needs to step in and kind of support the workforce with these worries and kind of meet them head on. And I think to do that, we need to get really good at leading with transparency because there are jobs that are going to be impacted, but leading with clarity also around what jobs are going to be impacted. How is that going to happen? I think we talk a lot about, hear a lot of, headlines and we're going to do more with less and we're going to, we're stopping hiring, etc. But it doesn't mean that all jobs are going to go away. I also saw some stats last week that actually it's going to create more jobs eventually. But at the micro level, at a company level, HR needs to really spend the time with leaders to do the workforce planning around what tasks, what jobs potentially, what roles are going to be done by AI, and then understand how does that then impact what humans are going to do and what are the human roles and the human jobs that are going to continue, and then what are those skills that we need to then build. And so I see that as a way for HR to really help lead the transformation and enable the transformation to say, okay, these things are potentially going to go away, but these are the things that are never going to go away, and therefore, or at least not that we think right now, and therefore that's where we're going to focus our investments, upskilling, coaching, making sure that people feel that they have a career ahead of them, doing the things that only humans can do. I heard another really great comment last week was sort of like humans lead and AI is in the loop, and I think that's sort of the perspective that we should all take. It's just another tool, and humans are going to continue to lead, but the way we lead and what we lead might be a little different. So I think, yeah, the workforce planning, leading with clarity, leading with transparency, and enabling the humans in the workforce, that's where HR should be spending their time to ensure that continuous, engagement and career opportunities and that people get to grow in their careers.
Yeah, yeah. That's the stuff that HR is good at, right? I mean, this is what they
Exactly.
do. I mean, I realize they're getting the pressure from a new tool that seems more complex and going to have a bigger impact than other tools that they've had to work with in the past. But HR's had technical skills at some level, right? They're not the CTO or the CIO, but they've those technical skills that they need to build the things that they need to drive the HR function. But the people skills are the things that they do. And I feel like that's where they need to lean in, but they also need
Agreed.
to have a grasp on what is happening from an AI perspective. And if they don't feel comfortable talking about it, that's going to shine through.
Right. And I think that that's where the kind of my second point. So the first point is how do we help the business? And it's really through that workforce planning and kind of engaging and making sure that we lead our employees and kind of our workforce in a way that feels good. And then the
Yeah.
second point is, yes, how do we ourselves use AI in HR to transform? Because again, we don't want to be left behind. I actually heard examples last week where HR is out front leading. So not only do you have an opportunity to lead the business through the workforce transformation, right? The strategy of what's humans going to continue to do.
Yeah.
Let's do the strategic workforce planning here, and let's then invest in the human side of things, but then also on ourselves. We have an opportunity because most at this point in time, and not talking everyone, if you're working in a maybe small or medium-sized company, you may or may not have already moved to the cloud, but many, many, many organizations have already moved to the cloud, likely have one, two, three, four, you name it, 20 different tools in their ecosystem that all now have AI in them. So you just gotta like think about what is already there and try not to reinvent the wheel, but really lean on your partners that you have in your technology ecosystem. And I do think HR has started to get more technical. We can definitely become more technical. We need to understand how data flows. We need to understand, kind of what's possible. With APIs, we just need to understand sort of the general kind of plumbing, if you will, of how technology works so that
Yeah.
we can then reimagine the opportunities. Now, we don't have to build it, we don't have to be the experts behind it, but we sort of have to have a little bit of an idea. And I think if you work with your technology partners, they will also have an idea, right? And they now have AI already in their tools. So then that's where you kind of start leverage the AI that you already actually have, but not just sort of like, oh, we have this, let's plug it in, but do it in a way that's really deliberate, right? Okay, what problems are you really solving? What experiences are you trying to drive? What's important to your business? Is it important to be operationally efficient? Maybe you start with some, more automation use cases. Is it important to be, have an amazing employee experience? Well, then you start with some use cases maybe around onboarding, whatever it may be. Or, one example that I heard last week was, we're a high performance culture. We need to measure that. We need to drive that. And so therefore, where this company was, they started with kind of setting clear goals, and they started with, using AI to help write more actionable feedback. And it really is paying off. And it took them like 3 months to do that because they were using the assets that they already had in the system. They had to implement or buy anything new. They just had to use what they had, but they had to be very clear, which problem are we solving? Because, company A, company B is all going to be different. So I think that's sort of my other piece, is that HR can support the business, but also transform themselves by really leveraging what we have. And in this company's case, they were almost the first to implement AI in the whole company because they were using the assets that they had already put in place. So
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the piece. And then the third piece, which, I'm sure we'll get to, Teri, is what does that mean for HR? Like, what's the HR function going to look like in the future, based on, how everything
Yeah.
is transforming? But that's, I think that's what
Yeah.
I'm hearing, that's what I'm seeing. Those are sort of the two topics that I think everybody needs to, continue to work on.
Yeah, you said a key word there in that conversation, which is goals. And one of the things we talked about at HR Tech was, has the organization really set the goals? Where are they expecting those goals to be set? Because I see, at least at the CEO level, they're coming to HR to help lead this transformation because they're seeing this as a people transformation and not necessarily a tech transformation. And so, are they getting the goals set at the right level so that they know what they're charging against, right? What are we trying to achieve versus just implementing AI? Because I keep hearing this sort of, well, we have to do AI. What does that even mean? We do AI. Like, you already have it, it's already there. You need to be thinking about how you're leading the business and what the impact of these things are going to be and what are the use cases that you're trying to solve for, as you said.
And don't make them up. Like, don't Don't look at your, your neighbor company and say, well, they're doing XYZ. Or you come home from a conference and say, oh, well, Standard Chartered did this on their goal setting. Well, it's like maybe that's not that important to you. You have to really do the research.
Hey, we're the payroll baddies, and our mission is to make payroll fun and relatable.
And call out industry when we hear it.
You gotta call it out. You gotta call it like you see it. But we also gotta shine a light on all those unsung payroll heroes out there, making sure we get paid.
Yeah, those are the real payroll baddies out there, and we love sharing their stories and showing them love.
With gold chain and everything, baby.
By the way, SAP is the best payroll out there, and if you don't like it,
Get out.
Do the user research. Like I would say that's one skill set that is new but absolutely critical in HR, and it's not something that's very easy to just pick up, but get the skill set into your HR organization now around user research, user experience design, right? So user research is really critical because you're not going to get the impact that you want unless you're solving the right problem. And the way to figure out what problem to solve is to do the research. So we can spend, I think 80% of of sort of when we did some of this at JP Morgan, we spent so much time what we call discovery, right? Like spending the time with the user, sitting down next to the recruiters and watching them go through all of their clicks and clicks and clicks and clicks, right? And so, okay, well, where are you hitting, where is the friction in the system? And the users can be HR, but of course, they're going to be managers, they're going to be leaders, they're going to be, employees in your organization, but do the research, bring the skill set of user research into your organization, HR team, and do the research on the users on kind of what's really creating the pain point. Because you know what, if you solve that for them, you're not gonna have any problem with adoption. Like that's gonna drive your adoption right there and your win, right? So be very clear on the problems you're solving, and like you said, goals. Like what are you trying to achieve? What does good look like? And you define that as part of it. Because even if you don't hit it in the first 3 months, 6 months, you can get more feedback and see where you need to make a tweak, right? So this is when it becomes more kind of how HR needs to work differently and the skills that they need to have differently, which is that agile, right? It's not like build, unveil, and it's perfect, but rather like be more agile in that way. And AI, like it seems maybe scary and big, and I don't understand it. There's so much stuff out there. You can just upskill yourself around just kind of the nuts and bolts of it a little bit, and then you see it's not it's not a big and scary thing to implement. You try it. Like I said, if it's already in your system, you can really start experimenting. And I think that's and then you learn so much along the way.
Yeah. I think it's important for individuals too to think about their own learning, because yes, there's an expectation that the organization is providing learning and training opportunities and things like that. But some of this is personal, right? You have to dig in and figure out what you need to know. I mean, everybody's I think we heard through our research that, 70% of the organization, maybe even higher than that, they're already using some form of AI, right? Yeah. On their own, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever the case might be. But the reality is, in terms of the numbers of people who were actually using it within the organization as something built in, was much, much lower. We're talking 30 some percent of organizations saying we're using embedded AI. Now, some of that might be they just don't know it's embedded. But in their thinking, we haven't embedded enough, AI from that perspective. We also learned that at the board level, they believe their organization lacks the skills to implement AI in a meaningful way. And even at the executive level, it was a question of knowledge and skills. Like these were the biggest concerns, the biggest barriers to implementing AI. But some of the reality is what you just talked about, which is the tedium, the hard stuff. Like the hard stuff is sitting and figuring out what people actually need to fix and make better, not sitting around contemplating ideas about, hey, we could just, we could implement this tool. I just saw the shiny new object online and it just looks great. And let's just implement it and everybody will be so much happier. No, you have to do the work. Like you have to go and see where the gaps are and the problems and the things that you can really have a true impact by new technology, whether it's AI or something else.
Yeah, and I saw some, some a while ago now, but like the real kind of upskilling and impact of AI is actually really happening at the team level, right? So instead of creating, and of course, like I think that there is also a lot to say for HR supporting, with kind of the upskilling opportunity of a century to sort of make sure that we get everybody somewhat literate, etc. A lot of the sort of upskilling and the actual use is, like I said, it's happening at the team level where, that's where innovation really can happen as well, because that's where people don't even think about it as like user research, or they're just like, I have this problem, I want to try and like fix it, and then here is how I tried using AI, and then they're sort of sharing that use case with each other in teams, and then people start using it, and that's kind of how it multiplies. But I still think that HR does have um a responsibility in that kind of enablement aspect, not just what I talked about earlier around the kind of workforce planning and making sure that we get the right skills where we need them, but also kind of general upskilling of the workforce in AI. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think it's sort of like where I've seen it work is again putting it where people work. Like this is again like an opportunity. We hear this, but like learning in the flow of work, but really put it there where you're, in Teams, if that's where you're working with Slack or whatever. Like that's I think where if you have an opportunity to really sort of these bite-sized micro learning, whatever you want to call them, and then also sort of try and figure out a way to accelerate, or accelerate or share that smaller team learnings with kind of the wider company. And there are lots of different ways of doing that, right? Like learning moments and, hackathons or whatever. Like it's just so many things that we can enable as HR to sort of learn to help enable the organization to learn more about AI as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, as individuals, this is kind of a turning point in from a technology perspective. So, if you're still planning on staying in the workforce, you need to continue to upskill yourself so you're ready for what comes next. And some of those jobs that you talked about that are going to go away, I agree. There's going to be whole new jobs that are going to be created out of this, just like there always has been in the past. And, we as individuals want to be ready for that. Like,
Yeah.
where are some of the things that we're going to be able to innovate, change, and do differently that we couldn't do before? I think one of the things HR uh, needs to work on is sort of bringing people to the same place in time. Like, let's get rid of the nightmare scenarios, right? And let's get people on a level playing field. But what we're seeing some organizations do, and I know you've seen this with like I think it was Moderna that, and I don't know how long this will last. It'll be really interesting, but they've sort of merged the HR and tech, which I just blows my mind. Like I just I don't see how that will be a long-term solution. But I do think things are going to evolve.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I actually recently wrote an article about this in response to sort of there was this Harvard Business Review article about the merging of the CTO and the CHRO into one role. And I I'm with you. I don't think it's a good idea. For the reason kind of that I gave earlier. I think it is HR's job to take care of the human workforce, if you will. And of course, I think that it's critical that HR understands the impact of AI and understands what is possible with AI, understands technology enough to take advantage of the opportunity that lies in front of us. But I do think that kind of as caretakers of the human workforce, I do think that there's plenty of responsibility to put on a CHRO in today's world without also kind of piling on the CTO role and sort of that piece. They have to absolutely work closer together. but I still do think that the mandate is so different. And I think that HR, kind of like they've done it at ServiceNow, with Jackie Cannon, she's the enablement officer. I think that's like chief HR and AI enablement. I think that's great. Like I think
Mhm.
that's where HR can, like I said earlier, really play a role in enabling the workforce through planning, through upskilling, through, really, yeah, through those two things, like workforce planning and upskilling, where the CTO can continue to build AI use cases across the organization. And I think that the two together, like I think that's great, but I don't think we should be merging them at this point in time.
Yeah. Is that enabler role, is that kind of working? Because I can see, when I look across the C-suite overall, and to me, AI is having an impact across that entire C-suite.
Mhm.
And the C-suite needs to be engaged in this at every level, right? I mean, it's not like you just put a project manager in there and say, go figure out AI. And so thinking about that C-suite and having somebody who's making the bridge, right? Because we all know we try very hard to work closely together at the C-suite, but we don't always speak the same language. And so, sort of having that enabler, it sounds like a really cool role that is helping tie those pieces together. Because it's not just like we're getting ready to do a big finance event, and finance is like, we need to better understand what's happening here from an AI perspective and how that's impacting HR, because we're making a lot of decisions about HR technology.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
Yeah. And, and I think the enablement, it's so much about change management. Like it's so much about change management. And I think if HR, if anyone in the C-suite should be able to do that is HR, right? Like, so I think that it's enabling the change. It's really sort of really, which is kind of where we started, right? This is opportunity of a lifetime for HR to have an impact, because really we're talking about the transformation of the workforce and transformation, enabling the change, enabling the upskilling, enabling the kind of unlocking kind of the path for the workforce, how they're going to be working with this technology that's now coming or that's already here. And I think, yeah, so I really like this enabling kind of, we're enabling that transformation through people, again, people leading and kind of AI in the loop. I think it's critical. The change management is probably the most important, like everybody always says, but
yeah, well, there's no question, all right, because this is having, cultural shifts in the organization as well, right? And there's this need to sort of understand what is our level of, I mean, one of the first things you start with in change management is sort of assessing where you are, right? So we can
yeah,
figure out what are the gaps we need to get where we're going. And so we're assessing that AI maturity level, right? And I think this is where organizations, as they think about, the culture within the organization, and how do we maintain that? If we like our culture, how do we maintain that culture? But at the same time, we've got to be ready for this. We've got to get our workforce ready for this. We've got to move forward. We've got to move into the future. What do we need to be thinking about?
yeah. And I think that's right. I think that the kind of assessing, one of the really interesting tools I've seen out there now is we partner with this research firm, Kyle and Cole, Cal Lagunas, and they've done this AI momentum model, which looks at, different aspects of readiness for AI and, obviously knowledge and like what kind of your systems, but also like governance, do you have the governance in place? And then you can assess, sort of the leadership versus the employees. And I think that's really critical to understand that gap. As a leader, if you want to bring your workforce with you, you could be out there and talking all day and nobody's going to want to hear it or believe you, or just going to be spiraling worrying about their job. So back to sort of leading with clarity and leading with
Mm-hmm.
transparency is really, really critical as a leader in this moment of time. And then I think, back to one piece around governance that we haven't talked about, like you have to, we kind of, when we started with this back at the bank, it was early days, right? So it wasn't really, we have the brightest minds around, data and technology and risk management and governance and all of this, but it's sort of like there's still no clear guidelines set or sort of practices set around kind of what's acceptable, what's not. How do we sort of navigate the legal landscape? That's still forming, how do we navigate, the impact this is going to have? How do we trust it, et cetera? And so we were able to move fast because we were sort of building that with them. And I think that's also really critical, is to bring those types of stakeholders with you on the journey, because the C-suite can be like, yeah, all good, let's go, right? Like this, you see all the opportunities, but what you
Yeah.
don't want is to come down, having done all the work, and then you're going to sort of have to hit the brakes because you didn't bring your, compliance and legal, et cetera, stakeholders with you along the way. So I think that understanding that perspective and helping them in their change journey, understanding the kind of different change readiness from an employee and a leader perspective, and sort of bridging those gaps. And then again, if you're solving people's problems, if you break them down, it's going to feel less scary, I think. So that's the other thing, like just showing them that you can sort of start with those use cases that are going to maybe turn the skeptics into believers. And then, then you need, there's something like 10%. If you have like 10% of the people that are using it, that are believing it, then you have a really strong sort of advocacy network that you can, lean on to continue to drive that change journey in your organization.
Yeah, yeah. What's old is new, right? I mean, change management's been around forever, and some of this we kind of have to get back to first principles, right? And if you've
Like
if
that.
you've got the organization in a good place from an HR perspective, then, moving the needle shouldn't be as hard, right? Like, do you have your processes in order? Are you able to conduct, and manage through change? Some of the major leadership skills, right? Do you have those leadership skills in
Yeah.
place? Because they're not that different than the skills that you have today from a leadership perspective. It's about how you get people to move forward. And a lot of that is through communication. And I think, if you're not on a team right now that is meeting on a regular basis across disciplines to talk about the impact of AI, you're probably missing out, right? You're getting behind. If people are worried about being behind, one of the ways you can catch up is get on that team or start that team,
Yeah.
right? And start getting people in the organization to start talking about these things and helping identify where the biggest impacts are going to take place.
I think that cross-disciplinary team is really critical. Cross-disciplinary sort of voices of your personas or whatever you want to call it, stakeholder groups, whatever it is. And back to my point around user research, like really understand the problems you can solve and the concern. And then from a change management perspective, okay, what concerns do you have, governance or legal or risk or whoever it is, with, this approach? And then kind of building that muscle to say, this is the problem I want to solve. Fall in love with the problem and go after that problem. And then AI is just the tool, right? It's just a tool that's going to help you, another tool in your toolbox to help you solve that problem. And then bring in the experts that know, kind of the engineers that can say, oh, or your kind of your vendor partners, right, in your ecosystem that can say, oh, you know what, like this is how we could solve that for you. This is how we could remove that friction using AI. Because it does, it's a new tool in your toolbox. It's very powerful, but it's still, like you said, same old story, right? You just have to really know the problem you're trying to solve before jumping out and starting to kind of put it in place. You're going to freak people out. Some people are
Yeah.
getting freaked out. Some people are already freaked out. I think that's critical in maintaining that, the trust in the organization as well.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I think when you think about the culture and the change management and the employee experience, if there's a lack of trust from the workforce, it's going to be very hard to move this forward. You have to have that first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think that trust comes from, like I said, broken record here, but really being transparent and being clear in how it's going to impact, what's gonna happen. That's hard, right? Like that's, you first have to figure out, okay, here's how we're gonna solve, here are the big problems we're gonna solve, or we want to like find more productivity, whatever it is. Then you go and you do the research, you do the work of figuring out, okay, well, how is that going to impact the teams, the jobs, the tasks that are happening, and how does that then reshape? How is what's going to be done? Which task, which steps in this process will be done by AI, and what does that then mean for the person who does that today? What could they do differently? What should they be, focusing on? And we talk about recruiters, other like human less recruiting process. I don't know that that's the right idea, but there's a lot of clicking and a lot of sort of processing, workflowing in the
Hmm.
recruitment process by the recruiter that could be spent, with people.
Yeah.
Or salespeople, they want to be spending that time selling the company, talking to people, meeting the best talent, right? So like that's just an easy way to see how the value chain, like kind of where the human plays a role, goes up the value chain. And like you said earlier, that's happened with every introduction of technology. Right? We introduced ATMs, cash points, bank, automatic bank machines. People are like, oh, we don't need bank tellers. You know what? Bank tellers, they got to do different work. They get to do more advisory
Yeah.
work. They get to help work with their clients, right? So I think I mean, maybe an optimist, but I do think that humans can have like a completely different value that machines can never have. And therefore, like, it's just about finding that, and it's nothing sexy about it. It's really do the mapping, do the research, do kind of, and then have the experts in the room to say, these five things can be done by AI in this journey. So let's now think about how that can be, what can the humans do instead, or how can they be spending their time in a more valuable way. So I think that's how we sort of, again, continue to build that trust and solve problems and really, I think, raise the impact of the HR function.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So if we fast forward a couple of years, maybe three, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like this thing is moving really fast, and then other times I feel like it slows to a crawl. But let's say 3 years. What's one thing you think will definitely change in the way HR operates? And then maybe one thing you hope will not change. We don't normally think about it that way, but there's definitely some things I think we hope will not change.
I hope that HR takes this as an opportunity to really focus on solving the business problems ahead of them. What are the problems that the business has or the stakeholders have that you can support solving? Like really be focused on that. And it could be within, an HR process, performance management. I don't know. Make it easier. Whatever that problem is that's going to help drive your business strategy. Be outward focus, less inward focus. I think HR, we have a tendency to kind of focus inwardly a little bit and in our silos and kind of solving the problems we think are important. Most of the time, funny when I speak to friends who are not in HR and I tell them what they do and they're like, oh, success factors, but like you implement that or Workday or whatever, like that didn't mean anything. What does that even like? Ugh, like it's not important. So let's just like let's not speak with that language. Let's be
Yeah.
focused on the business, solving the business problems, get outside of ourselves and work more agile. I know that's true, but be outside your kind of focus outwardly and do it in a way that's going to kind of drive value quickly. And then what HR shouldn't change is kind of continue to be the owner of kind of that, continue to build trust in the organization, continue to, take care of the people in the organization at this time. If there is a difficult time or, if it's a workforce event or a layoff or an external event, whatever it may be, HR, COVID, HR had to step in to really kind of support the workforce and I think psychological safety at this point in time is really critical. So HR continue to be the stewards and the caretakers of the workers and the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're all people. We're human. We have
Yeah,
thoughts and feelings. We try to
exactly.
we try to focus on our work, but sometimes the other stuff just sort of blends in, right?
Yeah, I think you build a lot of you can build amazing, resilient, strong cultures by doing that,
Yeah.
which I saw during COVID. Like I saw that happen just, where we had these really honest conversations or we were in each other's living rooms and it just the human side was like prevailed and created a connection and created an engagement and commitment to the work and amazing work was done. So I
It was
think,
done. It was done
yeah,
fast. Like,
exactly.
just the speed at which things were happening. So sometimes it takes that spark to, get us to get off our butts and move, right?
Yeah. And this isn't hopefully, it's not as dramatic, but
Yeah.
people are freaked out. And so let's just kind of remember a little bit about how we operated in that freak out environment during COVID, right? Like people are getting freaked out by AI. So like what are some of the principles that we use there to stay human, to be transparent and kind of admit when we know what we don't know. So I think that's just what HR needs to continue to remind, continue to own and continue to remind the leaders.
Yeah. Stay calm. And what is that calm and carry on. There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sofia, this has been great. I really appreciate you joining me today. This has been a great conversation. Where can people find you online or on social?
People can find me, of course, LinkedIn, Sofia Whelan. You can find me on my website, HorizonHuman.com. And that's the easiest way. Or just email me
Awesome.
at Sophia@HorizonHuman.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I also want to thank our producers, the Brand Method Media Group, our marketing team, and I want to thank you for tuning in. That's all the time we have for this week's episode of HR We Have a Problem. Be sure to listen to Stacy and Cliff next week while they spill the tea on HR tech. Also, our annual HR systems report is out, so go check it out on the website. The full report is out, but you can also get different segments. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app or leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. So drop us a line or schedule some time on the website. We'd love to hear about the topics that you want us to focus more on the show. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.